Hello everyone, it's Jen from Old Tinker Studio. In this tutorial, we will be learning how to make a procedural dirt texture with optional water puddles in Blender 2.9. So let's get on with the tutorial. We will be making a procedural dirt texture in this tutorial with an option to add water puddles. Make sure that you have the Node Wrangler add-on activated in your preferences. Delete the cube and add a plane. Rotate the plane around the x-axis 90 degrees. Apply the rotation with Ctrl A. We will start off by making our base dirt texture. Under the shading workspace, add a new material and give it a name. Add a Voronoi Texture node. This type of node evaluates a whirly noise at the input texture coordinates. This means that it can be used to simulate textures for things like stone, water, or biological cells. If we plug in the distance output of the Voronoi texture into the base color of the principled shader, we can see what the Voronoi texture is doing to our plane. Change the feature option to distance to edge. Now note, if you're using earlier versions of Blender 2.8, you should have a crackle option. Add a texture coordinate node. This type of node is used for the coordinates of the textures. Connect the object output of the texture coordinate node to the vector input of the Voronoi texture node. We will use object, so the Voronoi texture will use the coordinates of the object rather than the world coordinates. This allows us to use this texture on many different objects regardless of their shape or size. Then change the scale of the Voronoi texture as desired. I'm going to change mine to 3. Add a noise texture node. This type of node adds a fractal Perlin noise, which is a type of gradient noise, at the input texture coordinates. If we plug the factor output of the noise texture node into the base color of the principled shader, we can see the texture on the plane. Connect the object output of the texture coordinate node to the vector input of the noise texture node. Then change the scale until you get a noise that you like. I'm going to change my scale to 175 and change the detail as desired. I'm going to change mine to 15. Now we'll combine these two nodes. Add a mix RGB node in between the noise texture and the principled shader. Plug the factor of the noise texture into the bottom input of the mix RGB node. And plug the distance of the Voronoi texture into the top color input of the mix RGB node. Then change the blend mode to multiply. This will multiply the upper color value with the lower color value. We can now add a color ramp in between the mix RGB node and the principled shader. This type of node is used for mapping values to color by the use of a gradient. If we move the white color stop to the left, we can reduce the amount of noise in the center of the cells. We'll leave this color ramp black and white so we can use it for a bump map later. We can now add a second color ramp in between the first color ramp node and the principled shader. Select the black color stop and give it a dark brown color. I'm using the hex code of 3A251C. Then select the white color stop and give it a light brown color. I'm using the hex code of A4764A. Now add a second mix RGB node in between the color ramp nodes. Add a second noise texture node. Connect the output of the texture coordinate node to the vector input of the second noise texture node. Connect the factor of the second noise texture node to the bottom color input of the second RGB node. You can change the scale of the noise texture as desired. I'm going to change mine to 7.5 and change the detail as desired. I'm going to change mine to 15. Then change the blend mode to add. This will just add the upper color value with the lower color value. Now we can move on to adding some details to the dirt base. Add a Voronoi Texture node. Add a third mix RGB node. We'll place this between the first Voronoi Texture node and the first mix RGB node. Connect the distance of the second Voronoi Texture node to the bottom color input of the third mix RGB node. Change the feature option to distance to edge. Now again, if you're using earlier versions of Blender 2.8, you should have a crackle option. Connect the object output of the texture coordinate node to the vector input of the new Voronoi Texture node. Change the blend mode of the third mix RGB node to overlay. This will place the second Voronoi texture on top of the first Voronoi texture. Then change the factor of the third mix RGB until you achieve your desired look for the dirt. I'm going to change mine to 0.4. Now we can add some height to the dirt. Add a bump node. Connect the color of the first color ramp node to the height input of the bump node. And connect the normal output of the bump node to the normal input of the principled shader. Then adjust the bump node strength as desired. I'm going to change mine to 0.2. Select all the nodes except for the principled shader and the material output node. Join them with Ctrl-J. Then right-click on the frame and rename it to Dirt. Now we will add some optional water puddles to the dirt texture. Add a noise texture. Add a Voronoi texture. Connect the color of the noise texture to the vector of the Voronoi texture. And Ctrl-Shift left-click on the Voronoi texture to see the texture on the plane. Change the scale of the Voronoi texture to get your desired look. going to change mine to 1 and change the detail of the noise texture. Change mine to 15. Now add a color ramp in between the Voronoi texture and the viewer node. Then move the color stop to the right. The black areas is where the water puddles will be on the texture. Join these 3 nodes together with Ctrl J and rename the frame. Now add a new Mix RGB node and place it in between the first color ramp and the bump node. Connect the color of the water puddles color ramp to the new Mix RGB node. Change the blend mode to multiply. And set the factor to 1. Delete the viewer node. And connect the principled shader to the material output shader. And change the strength of your bump map to see the puddles. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.